Greetings, podcast listeners, and welcome back to a new episode of History from one student to another. The Reign of Terror was an 11th-month period characterized by intense violence, mass executions by guillotine, purges of political opposition to the state, and widespread fear and intimidation. In this episode, we'll look at how it affected French society and transformed the French Revolution, and conclude this two-parter about the French Revolution. After King Louis XVI was arrested on August 10, 1792, and a republic proclaimed the next month, Louis was brought to trial by the National Convention in December 1792 for high treason and crimes against the state. By 1793, the radical Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, seized control. Robespierre, who would become the face of the Reign of Terror, argued that it was not the man who served as the king on trial, but the institution of monarchy, and that the rebellion could not coexist with Louis XVI alive. Hence, he was found guilty on January 15, 1793, and executed by guillotine on the 21st of January, in the Place de la Révolution in Paris. Under the leadership of Robespierre, the Committee of Public Safety emerged as the key governmental authority, but the Republic feared that they were being attacked from within. One of the reasons for this was the War in the Vendée, a counter-revolutionary uprising against the radical policies and political changes implemented by the revolutionary government in Paris. Another reason was the Federalist revolts, which were triggered by the expulsion of the Jourdan political group from the National Convention. Those in the provinces of France were angered by the increased centralization of power and radicalization of the government in Paris, led by the Jacobins. A third reason was the assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, a radical journalist and member of the National Convention who used his newspaper, L'Ami du Peuple, to advocate for the interests of the lower classes, attack influential Parisian groups whom he deemed to be counter-revolutionaries, and call for further radicalization. These all strengthened the fears of the Republic, leading to the Reign of Terror. The Committee of Public Safety was established by the National Convention as a powerful executive committee tasked with overseeing the government's response to the internal and external threats it faced. It was initially intended to be answerable to the National Convention, with the convention holding the power to dismiss and appoint members of the committee. However, Maximilien Robespierre soon emerged as a key figure within the committee, and it quickly surpassed the convention in terms of political authority. The law of 14 Frimaire in December of that year, 1793, further centralized power to the committee and cemented its status as the de facto French government. Key to the committee was the Law of Suspects, which was issued on September 17, 1793, defining an enemy of the revolution as anyone whose actions suggested they were supporters of tyranny or federalism or those who opposed liberty. Local committees were in charge of surveillance and arresting those they deemed to be suspects. Then they would be imprisoned, or worse, brought to a revolutionary tribunal made of 16 magistrates, a 60-person jury, and a public prosecutor, all appointed by the convention, who within 3 days either acquitted the suspect or sentenced them to death, which was the increasingly common outcome. The bloodiest of periods was between September 1793 and July 1794. The streets of Paris witnessed a wave of mass executions by the favourite method of execution at the time, beheading by guillotine. Public squares, especially the Place de Révolution, became sites of frequent and gruesome executions. Thousands of people, including political figures, clergy, and ordinary citizens, were executed. Some of the key people executed were the former Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, executed for high treason, and Elizabeth of France, the sister of the late King Louis XVI, who was executed for conspiracy against the Republic. Aside from these and other nobles, some military leaders were accused of cowardice and executed. Former and failed leaders of the revolution were also executed, and of course, Robespierre and his allies purged their remaining political rivals. A particularly dark period during the Reign of Terror was during the winter of 1793-94 in Nantes, when between 1,800 and 4,800 people, including clergy, nobles and suspected counter-revolutionaries, were tied together in batches, loaded onto boats and then thrown in the Loire River. It is estimated that potentially between 31,000 and 65,000 people died during the Reign of Terror. including between 16,000 and 40,000 who were executed in single, public or mass executions, and between 15,000 and 25,000 who died in prison and from other factors like famine and disease directly caused by the Reign of Terror. One of the goals of the committee was to de-Christianize France. In October 1793, the National Convention instituted a new French Republican calendar, which began on the birth of the French Republic, rather than the birth of Jesus Christ. The cult of reason was created, mocking Christian superstitions, and priests were forced to renounce their faiths. In November, a grand festival of reason was celebrated at the newly rededicated Notre Dame Cathedral, now known as the Temple of Reason. But Robespierre believed that belief in a divine power was essential for human order, so he created the cult of the Supreme Being, which centered on the belief in the existence of divine power and the immortality of the human soul, and placed him at the center. In the month before Robespierre's eventual arrest, trials and executions escalated as prisons were full and there was a need to speed up judicial proceedings and reduce prisoner numbers. As internal and external threats to the Republic had been quelled, people failed to understand the need for the continued reign of terror by the committee's leading man, Robespierre. After he announced a list of enemies of the state, which included many members of the National Convention, which he refused to reveal, he was arrested on the 27th of July, 1794, after the convention turned against him, and the next day, he and 21 of his supporters were executed by guillotine. After the fall of Robespierre, the government repealed the most extreme revolutionary laws, and many Jacobins associated with the radical phase of the revolution were arrested and some faced trial and execution. A new form of government, known as a directory, was established, with 5 directors governing France from 1795 to 1799, with the aim of creating a more stable and moderate political environment. However, despite implementing economic reforms to stabilize the economy, its government was marked by internal and external conflict, corruption, and political intrigue. This period of political instability paved the way for the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was a military general who gained prominence through his victories during the battles of the Italian campaigns between 1796 and 1797, and victories during the Egyptian expedition between 1798 and 1799. Despite the eventual failure of the Egyptian campaign, it did provide distraction from the political chaos, from both internal dissent and external threats in France, and it put Napoleon in an incredibly positive light. When he returned to France from Egypt, his arrival was celebrated. Then, in a coup known as coup d'état of 18th Brumaire, which took place between November 9th and 10th, 1799, Napoleon and his allies overthrew the Directory. With significant political and social transformation taking place during the first years of Napoleon's rule, the coup d'état in which Napoleon came to power is widely regarded as the end of the French Revolution. Napoleon established a new constitution, created the Napoleonic Code, and centralized government, making it more efficient. He also provided economic stabilization by founding a national bank and implementing financial measures, and ending the religious conflict with the Catholic Church by signing the Concordat in 1801. Meanwhile, Napoleon's declaration of his status as emperor set the stage for what would come. The French Revolution had a lasting legacy both within France and globally. It freed France from rule by absolute monarchy, symbolized liberty, equality, and fraternity, and led to the introduction of a comprehensive legal system. Globally, it led to the spread of nationalism and all manners of revolutions. So, in this episode, I've spoken about the Reign of Terror and its successor, the Directory, and then the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. That's the end of this two-parter on the French Revolution. Let me know what you'd like to hear from me in the coming episodes. I won't be releasing any more episodes this year, but make sure you're subscribed to your streaming platforms so you're notified when they release in 2024. Follow me on Instagram for advance updates on when the new episodes will be released next year. Will they be released at the beginning of January? The end of January? February? Or as late as March? Well, the only way to find out is by following me on Instagram. Thank you all for listening, and see you in the next episode.